Good morning, everyone. Today, we are going to begin by exploring a fascinating and foundational concept in the behavioral sciences, ethology. So, what is ethology? Ethology is the scientific study of behavior, especially in natural environments, and it focuses on both animals and humans. What makes it unique is its emphasis on observing behavior as it naturally occurs, rather than in artificial or laboratory conditions. Historically, ethology grew out of zoology and evolutionary biology. Pioneers like Konrad Lorenz, Nicholas Tinbergen, and Carl von Frisch developed methods to study how animals behave in the wild, and more importantly, why they behave that way. Their work revealed that many behaviors are innate, biologically programmed for survival and reproduction. Now, you might be wondering, how does this relate to child psychiatry? Well, as it turns out, many of the same principles that apply to animal behavior, such as bonding, attachment, and the role of the environment, also apply to human development, particularly in early childhood. In fact, John Bowlby, one of the founding figures in child psychiatry, was deeply influenced by Lorenz's work. He used ethological principles to develop his attachment theory, which has shaped modern approaches to understanding the emotional and social needs of children. Ethology teaches us that behavior isn't random, it's shaped by evolution, biology, and context. This perspective is crucial when working with children, especially those facing psychological or developmental challenges. So, to sum up, ethology is not just about observing behavior. It's about understanding the purpose of behavior, why it evolved, how it helps an individual survive, and what it tells us about development, relationships, and mental health. And as we move forward in this lecture series, we'll see how ethological ideas continue to influence assessment, diagnosis, and treatment in modern child psychiatry. Thank you, and let's keep going. Now that we have a basic understanding of what ethology is, let's take a look at how it became deeply connected with the field of child psychiatry. One of the most influential figures in this connection was John Bowlby. Many of you may know Bowlby as the father of attachment theory, but what's often overlooked is how strongly his ideas were shaped by ethological research. Bowlby was particularly influenced by the work of Konrad Lorenz, who studied imprinting in geese. If you're not familiar with imprinting, this is the process where, shortly after birth, certain animals instinctively form a strong attachment to the first moving object they see, usually their mother. It's automatic. It's biological. And it's critical for survival. Bowlby saw parallels in humans. He argued that infants, too, are biologically programmed to form attachments to caregivers, not just for comfort or emotional reasons, but because these bonds are essential for survival and healthy development. He believed that babies come into the world equipped with behaviors like crying, smiling, and clinging that draw the caregiver close. These are what he called attachment behaviors. And here's the key quote that sums up his thinking. Attachment behavior is a biological survival mechanism. John Bowlby. This idea revolutionized child psychiatry. It introduced the concept that a child's emotional bonds in early life are not just shaped by the environment or parenting style, but are also grounded in evolutionary biology. So, thanks to ethology, Bowlby was able to shift the focus from blaming the mother or child for psychiatric issues to understanding how disrupted or insecure attachments could lead to emotional and behavioral difficulties later in life. This ethological perspective gave scientific credibility to the emotional world of the child, something that hadn't been fully acknowledged in psychiatry at the time. As a result, research and clinical work began to place much greater emphasis on early relationships, parent-infant bonding, and the long-term impact of separation, neglect, or trauma. In the next part of our lecture, we'll explore some of the key concepts from ethology, like critical periods, innate behavior, and fixed action patterns, and how they continue to shape the way we diagnose and treat children today. Let's continue. Let's now move into some of the core ethological concepts that are especially relevant to modern child psychiatry. These concepts not only help us understand behavior in early childhood, but also guide how we assess and intervene in clinical settings. Safety pin A. Attachment and bonding. Ethology tells us that proximity-seeking behaviors in infants, like crying, crawling toward a caregiver, or clinging, are not random. These are biologically programmed survival strategies. In other words, babies are wired to stay close to their caregivers because that closeness increases their chances of survival. Now, in child psychiatry, this biological drive is the foundation for what we call attachment theory. And when we assess attachment, we often look at three key behaviors. Secure versus insecure attachment. Does the child feel confident that the caregiver will return and provide comfort when needed? Stranger anxiety. Is the child appropriately cautious or fearful around unfamiliar people? Separation distress. How does the child react when separated from their primary caregiver? Understanding these behaviors is essential in diagnosing attachment disorders, such as reactive attachment disorder or disinhibited social engagement disorder, and also in evaluating the long-term effects of early trauma, neglect, or institutional care. Hourglass note down B. Critical periods. Another major contribution of ethology is the idea of critical periods, the specific windows of time during development when certain behaviors or skills must emerge. For example, forming a stable attachment usually happens within the first 12 to 18 months. Language acquisition has a sensitive period in the first few years of life. If these experiences are disrupted or delayed, say, a child grows up in an environment with no consistent caregiver, then the development of key emotional or cognitive functions may be permanently impaired. In psychiatry, this helps us understand why early intervention is crucial. Missing a critical period doesn't mean all is lost, but it often means the child may need intensive, tailored support to catch up. Repeat button C. Sign stimuli and fixed action patterns. Ethology also introduced us to the idea of sign stimuli, specific environmental cues that trigger automatic behavioral responses, called fixed action patterns. For example, a baby crying may instantly trigger a caregiver's urge to soothe and protect. That's not just culture, it's biology in action. In child psychiatry, this concept is very helpful when we look at automatic emotional reactions. Let's say a child with PTSD hears a loud noise and suddenly freezes or hides. That's a fixed response to a trauma-related trigger. Similarly, certain behaviors in autism, like repetitive movements, might be understood not just as symptoms, but as self-regulatory responses to sensory stimuli. These insights help us reframe behavior, not simply as problematic, but as adaptive or defensive responses to the child's environment or internal state. As we come to the end of this lecture, I want to leave you with a clear message. Ethology changed the way we see children. It taught us that behavior isn't random, broken, or simply learned, it's rooted in biology, shaped by evolution, and designed for survival. By observing behavior in its natural context, ethology gave us a deeper understanding of attachment, development, and the invisible threads that connect a child to their caregiver, their environment, and their inner world. John Bowlby once said that a child's tie to their caregiver is as strong as the roots of a tree to the earth. Without that secure base, a child cannot explode, cannot grow, cannot truly thrive. In child psychiatry today, we continue to see the truth in that statement. Whether we are assessing a toddler with delayed speech, a child with trauma-related anxiety, or a teen struggling to connect, we are always looking for the underlying biological signals, the disrupted patterns, the unmet needs. Ethology gives us the lens to see those patterns clearly. It reminds us that healing doesn't begin with medication or diagnosis, it begins with connection. With caregivers who are present. With environments that are safe. With relationships that are secure. So as future clinicians, educators, or researchers, I urge you to carry this ethological perspective with you. Observe carefully. Ask why, not just what. And never underestimate the power of a secure relationship to change a life. Because sometimes, the most scientific thing we can do in psychiatry is simply to notice, to connect, and to care. Thank you.